Hey guys, Julian here from synthwavepro.com. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. So in this Synthwave tutorial, let's explore how to make a dark synth preset. Let's get started. All right, so let's get started here. I have a little excerpt here. It's sort of like an intro. I want one of these epic intros, so that's what we're going to be focusing on today, in particular this dark synth preset. And I'm going to play the excerpt. We're going to have a close listen to it, and then we're going to go ahead and discuss this dark synth patch. All right, so let's get started. All right, cool. So this is the preset in question. Let me solo it. Kind of reminds me of the 80s. Something you'd hear in, I don't know, John Carpenter movie. And it's definitely sort of in that Stranger Things lore. So let's go ahead and synthesize this from scratch. I would go ahead and classify this as the type of preset that's sort of like a utility preset, very functional. You can use this in a variety of genres, dark synth, synthwave, cold wave, whatever the case may be. So let's go ahead and get started. If you have another synth other than Serum, I'll be using Serum. Go ahead and use that. They're pretty much all the same. Well, not really, but for what we'll be doing here, most synths have the parameters we'll be manipulating, okay? So I'm going to make myself another MIDI channel here. I'm going to copy the data right here. And so I'm going to disable our original patch, and this is the one we'll be synthesizing from scratch. Let me go ahead and call this Dark Synth Tutorial. And let me lower the volume. All right, so this is what we have right from the start. All right, so nothing too exciting. It defaults to a sawtooth here. If yours loads something else, go ahead and head on over to Analog, Basic Shapes, and then you can toggle to a variety of waveforms. So for this particular patch, despite the patch sounding as if it's a sawtooth or maybe a pulse width modulation waveform, we're actually going to leave this at the sine wave here, and we'll sort of force it to sound like a sawtooth in a few moments. All right, so first things first, let's go ahead and set our voices to 6 unison, that is. And if you're on an older system, I happen to be on an older Mac here, so I don't want to tax my system too much, so I'm going to keep this at 6. If you have the juice, if you have the power, you have a more recent PC or Mac, go ahead and crank that up to maybe 7 or 8. And so this is what it sounds like now that I've added those extra voices. All right. So we have all those sort of voices sort of doing their own thing, and that's how you get that sort of whoa, whoa, whoa sound. All right. So the next thing I want to do is manipulate the detune here. I'm just going to lower this to the point where it sounds a little more uniform. There, something at 0.06. Let's manipulate the blend here. It's not as noticeable when you're using a sine wave, but I have it set to about 84, 85 here, okay? All right, so the next thing I like to do is add some pulse width modulation. Now, typically you would use this on a square wave, but hey, through experimentation, I found that you get some pretty creative results once you apply the pulse width modulation to other waveforms, which is a really cool thing that you can do with Serum. So I'm going to head on over to this table here and make my way to pulse width modulation. And what this will do is that it will modulate the waveform to the point where you get that sort of buzziness, right? Now, of course, I don't want to sit here during the session and manipulate this knob, so we're going to have to use some LFOs. But for the time being, I'm going to set this to about 50%, And then later on, once we move to the LFO portion of the tutorial, we'll be assigning some of these LFOs to some of these controls here. But just keep this in mind. So again, the takeaway here is, consider experimenting by applying the pulse width modulation to a variety of waveforms, okay? And so the next thing I like to do is make a copy of this oscillator. So from oscillator A to oscillator B, as I may have mentioned in another tutorial, when you do that, you'll find that this defaults to the disabled button, but it's actually on. And so now we have a copy of the oscillator. All right, you can see that when I hover over the unison here, it goes to 6. This was a GUI glitch, right? So anyways, identical waveforms right now. The thing is that oscillator B will play at an octave higher. So 1 octave higher, this is what we call doubling. We get a larger sound. We get the sort of mid-range as well as the top end. So, but first, let's hear what this sounds like. So this is in unison. And now an octave higher. Now without. All right, so if you're looking to get a bigger sound, a larger sound, you can consider stacking oscillators in this manner. So we're not going to do any fine detuning here. We're going to have some detuning taking place a little later. But for the most part, I'm going to leave the controls slightly identical to this one. You can see we have to make our way to the pulse width modulation here and set it to about 50%, just like this one. And we'll move on to the next portion. Now, so right now I'm going to engage our filter right over here, and I'm also going to enable oscillator B so that both A and B are going to be routed to this low pass filter. Let's hear what this sounds like. All right, so nothing too exciting here. I'm going to set this to, let's say, about 100 and let's say about 112 hertz. I'm going to crank up the resonance here. And of course, it's not doing much because we haven't set any envelopes to this control. All right, so the first thing I want to do here is head on over to the envelope number 1. Envelope number 1 controls the amp envelope. That would be the volume, if you will. And so what I want to do is basically extend that release. So once we get to the end of this note, I don't want it to cut off so, abruptly. I want there to be some sort of trail, right? There we go. So you can see I've staggered the notes here, so they're not really legato. There's a slight space. And so once we stop playing, this is when the release control will sort of trail on, okay? And for no particular reason, it's just a habit I've developed, and so I like to do it this way. And so the next thing I want to do here is focus on envelope number 2. This one I will link it to our cutoff, and this one will be the one responsible for opening our filter and closing our filter. I've done this a few times in some of the tutorials. You'll find that when you're doing sound design, a lot of these mechanisms sort of repeat, all right? So let me go ahead and make some adjustments. All right, so right now our filter is going from basically the darkest point to the brightest point, and it's staying there partly because the sustain here is set so high. So I'm just going to lower that sustain. All right, so far so good. Now it's closing a little too quickly, so let's see if we can manipulate some of these controls. Now the decay would be responsible for having a gradual descent, which is what we want, right? So it's going to take its time to go from the brightest point all the way to the darkest point, and that is set by the decay. You'll see that as I increase this number, it takes longer to get to the darkest point. This is about 4.79 seconds. If I shorten this to about 837 milliseconds, well, it ramps down rather quickly. Okay, so what we want is to have a nice descent. I'm going to keep this at about 5 seconds, right? Another thing I want to do is take a look at the hold control here. This is almost like a secondary decay, and it's often ignored, but it's really valuable when you want to sort of add a little more, I guess, hold, that is, to your decay. And so that's exactly what we're going to do here. I may not want that much. I don't want it to be stuck at the top end of the frequency spectrum for too long. So I'm just going to lower this to, let's say, about 90. So the ADSR, or rather AHDSR here, is for the attack 0.5 milliseconds. The hold control is at 92 milliseconds. Those are two time-based controls. The decay as well, 5.15 seconds. It doesn't have to be precise. If you have other values, that's all good. The sustain here is at 0%, and this represents the darkest point of our signal. And of course, the release here is set to 15, but a 15 millisecond release is a little too short. So upon release, I'd like it to sort of be in line with envelope 1. You'll typically find that your envelope 2, your filter envelope, especially the release, will quite often mimic the release of envelope 1, your amp, right? They sort of work together. You don't want the envelope to be cut off because envelope 1's release is too short. So you basically want to be in the same ballpark. So for instance, here, envelope 2, we have it set to about 710 milliseconds. And we have sort of the same values here at 715 milliseconds for envelope 1, which is the amp envelope. All right. I'll be doing a lot more sound design here. So if you're not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do so that you know exactly when I drop some more tutorials. All right. So let's keep it moving. Now let's hear what we have so far. Okay. Pretty basic. So how can we jazz up our sound here? So first thing I want to do here is increase the, I guess, the harmonic content of our sound. And I'm going to engage another oscillator. This will be the sub here. And I'm going to pitch this an octave lower. I'm also going to toggle on one of the square waves here and link this to the filter so that the sub is routed to the filter. And this is what this sounds like. Now I'm just going to come down here and lower the volume. It doesn't have to be this loud. Now we're getting that really cool sort of spacey type of sound here. And I'm also going to add the noise generator to our sound here. This will be comprised of white noise. I'm also going to route this to our filter by clicking on this N button here. And let's play what this sounds like. Now let me boost up the volume. That's where we get that sound, right? Now we don't want too much of this. I'm just going to scale this back. Cool. So far so good, but it's still not sounding, I guess, synthwave enough. So let's turn to our LFOs, and this is where the magic really happens. So let's turn our attention to LFO number 1. I am going to assign this to PWM right over here for oscillator A. And I am just going to turn to the matrix and set LFO 1's type to bidirectional, meaning that it's going to toggle from left to right, which is exactly what we want. And let's hear what this sounds like. All right, so let me isolate all these other generators and oscillators and focus on oscillator A. Aha, so now we got this really cool sort of phasey sound, right? Very sort of 80s, you know, synthwave type of sound. Awesome. All right, so to me, this is oscillating a little too much. So what I'm going to do here is alter the speed, the rate. There we go. Because we're playing a whole note, we don't have to exaggerate the rate, right? We want it to be sort of gradual, and we want it swooning as it makes its way through the, I guess, the cycle of the sine wave here. Awesome. I'm also going to do the same thing for oscillator B here. So I'm going to bring LFO number 1 to the PMW of oscillator B. I'm going to turn this on, and let's hear what this sounds like. All right, so you can hear that when we get to the very extreme section of this waveform, it basically cuts out, right? So this is what's happening with oscillator B. All right, so we don't want that. We want a more consistent sound. So I'm just going to grab this sort of, it looks like a horseshoe here, and I'm going to adjust the, I guess, the pathway here. So I don't want the LFO to go completely all the way to about 5 o'clock. So now we have a consistent sound as that whole note is being held, right? So let's engage all our other oscillators here. I'm also going to lower the volume of oscillator B. Don't need it to be that loud. Cool. Okay, so we're not quite done with oscillator A and B's phase control here. We can get a lot of leverage out of these two controls. So let's turn our attention to LFO number 2, and we're going to focus on modulating the phase control, and we can get a ton of leverage out of this guy here. So I'm going to set this to bidirectional, just like that, and see what this does to the sound. Let me go ahead and solo. So now we're starting to get that distinctive synth wave, sort of out of tune, phasey sound. All right, so your phase control will determine exactly where during the wave cycle here your sound will actually kick in here, and you can see that by having this modulate, especially at the fact that we have 6 voices here, they kind of all start at different points, which sort of results in this phasing of the sound, which is really ideal, really cool, really retro, right? Now this may be a little too much, so what I want to do here is lower the rate to about a bar. Cool. I'm also going to do the same thing for our second oscillator here. So same thing, I'm going to bring this over to oscillator B and adjust accordingly. Let me add the other noise generators and oscillator. Now this is the random control here. This will determine at which point during the wave cycle the sound will actually kick in. This is the area. So they don't have to be identical. So in other words, oscillator B's random control here doesn't have to match oscillator A. Feel free to experiment. All right, so let's listen to the original sound here as a reference. All right, so we're almost there. Let's go back to our version. All right, so we still have our work cut out for us. Let's see if we can adjust the slope of this LFO number 2. All right, so you can adjust yours to taste. There's no right or wrong way here. Just feel free to experiment. But what I'm hearing in the other version is some detuning. And so let's turn our attention to the matrix here, okay? And let's assign LFO number 3 to global master tuning here. And this is where we're going to get that detuning sound here. So let's go ahead and manipulate the amount. That's a little too crazy. Now this slider over here is going to determine the amount. So this is going to be sort of like the dry wet control here. I'm just going to lower this to conservative values. There we go. All right, so the thing you want to watch out for when you're using the detuning control here is that typically you want the first sound, the initial transient, to be in tune, and then the tail of the sound, that's exactly where you want to apply that detuning sound, right? Otherwise, it just sounds a little too overboard, overdone. So what can we do? So again, we want the original sound to be in tune and the subsequent tail to start detuning. So these are the great things with LFO, especially here in Serum. We're actually going to have this LFO kick in a little later. So this LFO 3 will start detuning the pitch of our sound later, all right, once the original tone has been established. And in order to do that, well, let's go ahead and play it, and then we'll see what we can do. All right, so I'm going to turn my attention to the delay control here. And let's pay attention to what that's doing to the detuning. All right, to me that sounds really cool because what's happening, since we have it set to half note here, the first 2 beats, meaning beat 1, 2 will be in tune, and beats 3 and 4 will start the detuning factor. So let's listen again. Let me engage the metronome. So in tune, out of tune, out of tune, in tune, out of tune, out of tune, in tune, out of tune, right? So we're almost protecting the integrity of the initial sound and then, you know, eventually corrupting it with some detuning. Let's see if we can exaggerate this. So here I have it set to 16th notes, meaning by the time we get to, you know, the second 16th, we're already detuning. And I think it's a little too early. You know, we want to establish a nice sort of tonality, and then we want it to sort of have it detune. So I'm going to set mine to half note here, okay? Another control that's really useful is the smooth control. And so we're kind of sort of going to glide into the detune gradually. I think it's a nice, literally a smoother way of going from in tune, and then gradually shift into its detuned state. You know, it sounds like the detuning of our instrument is slightly going out of tune as time progresses, right? All right, so let's listen to the original. All right, so we have a few effects, right? Our original sounds a lot more aggressive. So one thing we can do to elicit that sound is add some compression here. I'm just going to add some settings here and go along. Let's go ahead and manipulate the threshold. Set it to multiband mode. All right, the top end is a little too stabby for me. Let's bump up the gain here. So next, let's go ahead and add some delay to our sound. I'm gonna set the delay after our compressor. Adjust the filter of the delay, set it to about quarter notes. Let's add some reverb. Maybe set the reverb before the delay. Alright, so I'm going to apply some low cutting here. I don't want the reverb to be too muddy. And so to listen to the reverb, I'm going to crank up the wetness of the reverb. Do some low cutting. A little too much. If I want my reverb to be very bright, I'd set it to about the 7 o'clock point here. If I want it to be darker, I'll set it to about 11 o'clock. All right, so let's scale this back. Let's listen to the original. All right, let's keep going. We're almost there. Let's get rid of some boxiness here. And maybe we can get rid of some of this stuff here at the very, very top. All right, let's play it in context. All right, so let's see if we can improve the sound just a little more. So I'm going to add a multi-band compressor here. And I already know I have one in the Serum module here, in the effects module here. But I would characterize this first one as one that's more geared for sound design. It has this aggressive quality to it. And I love the sound, right? But I think the second one, really used to sort of, so it's more of a traditional compressor, right? So at this point, I'm really just focused on that psst sound, right? So I'm really going to smash the top end here. I don't want it to be that piercing, but I do want that top end in the signal. I got about 4 dBs of gain reduction here. I'm going to make this up slightly. All right, so that's what it sounds like without. Kind of piercing and on. A little smoother. Of course, these other ranges aren't really doing much. I'm more concerned with the top end here. All right, and I'm also going to not make this as wide, right? I'm gonna collapse the stereo field, make it sound a little more mono. All right, so let's play in context. Easy peasy. If you're new to the channel, thank you for hanging out and consider subscribing and liking the video. If you've been here since the very beginning, I thank you so much for your support. That being said, stay safe and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.